Hey, Yvonne, thanks for your work in week 8. Wanted to send you a video by way of reply here and highlight a few things in what you've written in the responses for week 8. The first is I'm really just thrilled with what you've written for what Romans 10:9 to 13 is about. I think you've captured well Paul's concern to communicate that salvation is a gift, that finding the words Lord Jesus on our lips, believing in our hearts that God raised him from the dead is something that God has done, something that God has inspired, as opposed to thinking that it is a condition that we have met. Because I think if we interpret it as a condition that we have met, then it doesn't really fit what Paul is teaching the audience, people of Gentile background in Rome, in relation to his relatives. Some of the people of Israel who are hostile to them and who are faithless. But Paul's point is that the audience is not to treat them with any boasting or sense of superiority or judgment, but to instead recognize that they, as people who have the words Jesus is Lord on their lips and this conviction about his resurrection in their hearts, have become bearers of a gift, witnesses to the gracious way that God works to form the people of God in the world, and to have mercy finally upon all. So that I think you've gotten really well here in this second forum. You've got some good stuff in the first forum as well. I think what I would want to maybe push back on a little bit here is where you say that Paul challenges the notion that ethnic or genealogical lineage alone determines membership in God's covenant community. That's what Johnson thinks. But I just don't think that that's true to Romans, because um, Paul doesn't say that he's arguing against uh, physical descent or genealogical lineage. He's arguing against works, against justification by works, against the idea that belonging to Abraham's family according to works is what inherits the promise. That he is opposing, but that's not about mere physical descent or genealogical lineage or anything like that. So that seems to me to be something that Witherington and others kind of bring into this passage as if it were Paul's concern, when in fact I just don't think that it is anywhere on the radar. Instead, I think that Paul is claiming that Israel, from its very beginning in Abraham, uh, has been shaped according to God's promise by God's election. It hasn't been shaped according to works, by whether or not people are obedient. And he shows that by telling the story of how Isaac came from Abraham and then Jacob came from Isaac, how at each stage in the formation of the family, the future is determined by God's promise and not by the sufficiency of the works of the current people or something like that. Um, it is the case, I think, by implication, that um, Israel, over its generations, is shaped so that certain parts of Israel's past don't produce a future in Israel. So this would be Ishmael not producing a future in Israel, but becoming the Ishmaelites. This would be Esau not producing a future in Israel, but becoming the Edomites. And by extension, this would be the 10 tribes of the north of Israel: Issachar, Naphtali, Dan, Manasseh. These tribes of the north, if you remember, most of them were absorbed by other Gentile peoples when Assyria invaded and resettled them, exiled them. And so there were indeed parts of Israel that were from Israel, but then did not produce people who were themselves Israel. And that's what I think Paul means by not all who are from Israel are themselves Israel, but those, there are some who are like his relatives in view from Israel and themselves Israel, and therefore the fruit of God's election that Paul is urging the audience to take account of, to embrace as part of the family rather than people that they could disown. So I hope that's helpful to you. Thank you again for some good engagement with the material and good responses. Hope to see you in week 9.